In the late 70s and early 80s, one name was synonymous with the future, with magic, with joy in every family's living room. That name was Atari. They didn't just create a product, they birthed an entire industry. From the simple boop of Pong to the pixelated adventures on the Atari 2600. They turned TVs into portals to other worlds. They were the gods of a new digital universe, an empire that seemed indestructible. But what if I told you this empire collapsed so spectacularly? They took an action that is almost unbelievable. That they drove truckloads of their broken dreams into the New Mexico desert and buried them under the hot sand? This is not an urban legend. This is the tragic story of Atari, the company that invented video games and then buried them. It all began in 1972 with two engineers, Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney. Their secret weapon was a shockingly simple game called Pong. But Atari's true genius came in 1977 with the release of the Atari 2600. This was a revolution, a home console with interchangeable game cartridges. Suddenly, the possibilities were endless. Classics like Space Invaders, Asteroids, and Adventure made the 2600 a must-have in every American home. Atari became one of the fastest-growing companies in US history. Their Fuji logo was a cultural icon, and they absolutely dominated the young market they had created. But phenomenal success planted the seeds of fatal arrogance. Atari became convinced customers would buy anything with their logo on it. They began to disrespect the very people who built their success. The game programmers, underpaid and uncredited. A group of star programmers left to form their own company, Activision. This was a historic turning point, the birth of the third-party developers. Soon, dozens of other companies followed, and the market was flooded with games of varying quality. Atari had lost its monopoly on software for its own machine. Instead of raising standards, Atari entered a race for quantity over quality and began digging its own grave. And then, in 1982, they picked up the final shovel. Steven Spielberg had just released a global blockbuster, E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. In a rushed decision driven by greed, Atari paid $25 million for the game rights, a staggering sum at the time. The catch? They had only 5 weeks to develop the game from scratch to hit the Christmas season. The result was a catastrophe. The E.T. game was nearly unplayable, a confusing mess of controlling a blob-like character who constantly fell into pits. But believing the movie's power would sell anything, Atari frantically produced 5 million cartridges. It was an arrogant bet on a broken product. This was the final straw for an already saturated market. Consumers and retailers were tired of low-quality games. E.T. wasn't just a bad game, it became a symbol of Atari's betrayal of its fans. Millions of unsold cartridges were returned. Stores refused to stock any more games. Consumer confidence had collapsed. The E.T. disaster triggered a chain reaction, leading to the great video game crash of 1983. Industry-wide revenue plummeted by 97 video games. Once the future were now dismissed as a dead fad. Faced with millions of worthless cartridges piling up in warehouses, Atari made a bizarre and desperate decision. In September 1983, under the cover of the desert night, trucks hauled hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions, of unsold cartridges to a landfill in Alamogordo, New Mexico. There, they dumped them all into a pit, ran them over with a steamroller, and poured concrete on top. This wasn't just inventory disposal, it was a funeral. Atari was burying its failure, burying the evidence of its hubris, and in a way, burying the golden age of video games itself. For years, this event was considered an urban legend. It wasn't until 2014 that a documentary crew excavated the site and found the crushed cartridges, confirming the story was true. So what really killed Atari? The E.T. game wasn't the cause, it was just the final symptom of a deep-seated disease. That disease was arrogance. They believed their brand was invincible. They lost their creative talent and failed to control quality, allowing the market to become polluted with bad products. The legacy of Atari is a dual lesson. They showed the world the magic of video games, but also how fragile the industry could be when player trust is broken. Their lesson was etched into the philosophy of a Japanese company named Nintendo, who would resurrect the industry years later with their own seal of quality. The story of Atari is a tragic warning. The company that invented the future became so blinded by its own success that they nearly dragged that future into the grave with them. Their power was absolute. Their rise was meteoric, and their fall was one for the history books. The shift from innovator to imitator was swift as competitors like Activision created better games. Atari resorted to rushing out poor movie tie-ins. Their famously bad Pac-Man port for the 2600 was another nail in the coffin, a flickering ghost of the arcade classic that angered millions of fans. This pattern of disrespecting the source material and the consumer became their downfall. They had stopped innovating and started exploiting. The burial itself was a deeply symbolic act. It represented a desire to erase a mistake rather than learn from it. A company built on creating vibrant digital worlds ended its reign by creating a barren, physical grave for its own products. The great video game, Crash, wasn't just about one bad game. It was a market correction fueled by a complete loss of consumer faith. Atari was the primary cause of that loss of faith. They had poisoned the well for everyone. The excavation in 2014 provided a sense of closure. A physical confirmation of a story that sounded too crazy to be true. Finding those cartridges was like finding the black box of a crashed airplane, the evidence of a disaster born from a series of bad decisions. Ultimately, Atari's story is a perfect case study in the dangers of losing touch with your core audience and your core product. They forgot that people don't buy logos, they buy experiences, and when the experience becomes bad, the logo becomes worthless. Their story has been a cornerstone of business school case studies for decades, a perfect example of how not to manage explosive growth. It teaches us that no amount of market dominance can save you from a bad product and a broken relationship with your customers. The fall of Atari cleared the path for a new era of gaming, one with a renewed focus on quality and creativity. So in a strange way, the entire industry owes a debt to Atari's spectacular failure. They flew too close to the sun, and their crash left a crater that changed the landscape forever. A cautionary tale written in the language of pixels, plastic, and concrete. What's your favorite classic Atari game? Let us know your memories in the comments below. If you found this dive into gaming history fascinating, help us decode more giants by hitting that like button. And for more stories of epic corporate meltdowns, subscribe to Decoding the Giants. We honor the fallen giants by learning from their epic mistakes. The games may be simple, but the lessons are profound. Their story is a permanent part of gaming's DNA.